Okay, we're going to talk about elections. Um, when the Founding Fathers were writing the Constitution, the two most obvious ways that they could have written in there to having a popular election where everyone votes, and then obviously they decided not to go with that. The second way was to have Congress choose them, like they did, like Parliament does in England for the Prime Minister. Popular election, they decided not to go with that because they felt that um, the population wasn't informed enough to make a decision on who would be the best person to be president. We obviously didn't have television and radio and access to news in 1787 when they were writing the Constitution like we do today. You know, there were farmers who lived in remote areas, and so that the best and the brightest should be the ones to pick the president. And then Congress choosing, they wanted to make sure that the president wasn't under the thumb or under the control of Congress. This idea of separation of powers and checks and balances. And if you have a president who has to do the will of the Congress, that kind of defeats the whole entire purpose of both of those. So they decided to go with the Electoral College. The Founding Fathers, also sometimes called the Framers because they framed the Constitution, decided to have presidential electors choose the president and vice president. In Article 2 of the Constitution, it spells out that each state would have the number of electors equal to their members of the House and the Senate. And so every state is guaranteed to have at least 3 electoral votes because every state has 2 senators and the minimum number of House members that a state can have is 1. So the minimum number of electors is 3. Indiana has 11 electors, and we get that by taking the 9 members in the House, 2 members in the Senate, which gives us 11 electors. So there are 538 total electors. You get 435 members in the House, 100 members from the Senate, and then the 23rd Amendment gives Washington, D.C. 3 electoral votes. When the framers wrote the Constitution, they said that each elector would get 2 votes, and both of those votes were originally supposed to be for president, and the 12th Amendment changes that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Those electors who were chosen by the community would be the best and the brightest, and they would be the most informed, and they would make the best choice for who president would be. And then they would, after they were chosen in the general election in November, would go and vote for their first choice for president and their second choice for president. And the way it was intended to begin with was that the person who came in first would be president, and the person who came in second would be vice president. And this was all fine until we get political parties. So the election of 1796 is where we see the flaw in this plan because of the rise of political parties. In the election of 1796, John Adams, who was a Federalist, comes in first. So he becomes president. Thomas Jefferson, who is a Democratic Republican, comes in second, so he becomes vice president, which obviously is a problem because these two are from separate parties. It would be like today John Adams would be a Democrat, Thomas Jefferson would be a Republican. And so we come to the election of 1800, also known as the Revolution of 1800. And the reason that it's called that is because this is the first time, basically in history, and it's still not so common today, that you have a peaceful transfer of power from one party to its political rival. So in the election of 1800, so we don't have the situation take place that we did in the election of 1796 where the president and the vice president are from 2 different parties. They decide to run on party tickets. So John Adams and Charles Pinckney run as the Federalist candidate. John Adams was for president, Charles Pinckney was for vice president. Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr run as they were Democratic Republican candidates. Thomas Jefferson obviously was intended to be president, Aaron Burr vice president. So what happens is because each elector is able to cast 2 votes, but each of those votes are for president, when an elector cast 1 vote for Thomas Jefferson, then they would cast their second vote for Aaron Burr. But those votes, once again, were both for president because the Constitution had not been changed. So Although Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr win over John Adams, what it actually does is, because each elector cast one vote for Thomas Jefferson and one for Aaron Burr, it creates a tie between Jefferson and Burr. And if there is no clear winner for the presidency, then the election goes to the House of Representatives. In this case, the House of Representatives voted and tied 35 times between Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr, and it was not until Alexander Hamilton steps in on Thomas Jefferson's behalf and sways a few to vote in Thomas Jefferson's direction that he's actually declared the winner on the 36th vote. Some changes caused by the election of 1800. This is the first time, and from that point on, you have the party's nomination of a president and a vice president together. So we have the party tickets. This is the first time you actually have in advance the electors pledge to vote for a particular party. So in today's elections, you would actually have in the state of Indiana, 11 electors, or 11 different people who are Republicans who have pledged if the Republicans win, they will cast their vote for the Republican candidate. Then you will have 11 different electors who are from the Democratic Party. And there are 11 different people who have pledged if the Democrats win the popular vote in the state of Indiana, they will cast their ballot for the Democratic nominee. So what happens is you actually have 22 people, 11 Republicans and 11 Democrats, and it depends on who wins the popular election in the state of Indiana decides which one of those 11 actually get to vote. The other thing we see is that they actually vote in line with their pledge. They no longer are free agents. Originally, the intent was that these people were to vote the way according to their own conscience. They would pick who they thought was the best candidate. But now they're basically a rubber stamp. Whoever wins the popular election, those people will go and vote for that candidate. We also get the 12th Amendment because of the election of 1800, which changes the way the two votes for the electors are handled. Instead of both of those votes being for president, one of those votes is for president and one is for vice president.